Welcome to the GuestX podcast, where my co-host Brian O'Malley and I uncover the latest technologies and human-driven initiatives that are raising customer expectations and forever changing how we define customer experience across a host of industries. If you are passionate about creating incredible content and unique experiences, join us as we talk to leading product and experience experts across the globe and learn about how today's most successful brands are setting themselves apart from the competition. Welcome to the GuestX podcast, Mr. Brian O'Malley, Mr. Guest Experience, Brian O'Malley. How you doing, bud?
Good, and you?
I'm good. It's been a while since we've chatted. There's been start of conference season. We haven't gotten a chance to get together a lot. What's been going on in your world?
Crazy. I think we're just getting past the summer season here with the vacation rules, so we calm down a little bit, trying to clean up the houses, get staff back into gear, and get ready for the next seasons. So it's been a really, really interesting period. I think travelers has changed quite a bit, owners have changed a bit, expectations have changed. So I think we're going to get into some of that stuff today, especially on the guest side. But you were at a pretty impressive conference. I think one of the first big conferences of the season, Streamlines, right?
Yeah, it was over at Streamline in Phoenix. It was only 107, so it was nice and cool. But no, it is. I think they pride themselves as kind of being the big kickoff to the conference season, and they do a nice job. I think outside of Verma, it's probably the largest conference for the vacation rental industry. Maybe, they probably had 700 attendees. I don't know that a lot was real different. I don't feel like I saw a lot of new or things that had changed, but it was good to, see everybody and start to get back together and start to get the travel legs under us, because it is about to be a long fall. Going to go over to Spain in a couple weeks, and where you and I were last year at the Vitour, and I think you and I will hopefully get together at a few conferences. We got Book Direct in Miami. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But I'm excited today because, going back, when we look at Explory too, ultimately, that concierge service is so critical to travel. I think it always has been. It always will be, because travel, generally speaking, you're going someplace you are unfamiliar with. And as much as we've tried to automate and make it easier to plan travel and plan your trips once you're going, it's still, you're looking for those local recommendations, those experiences that really resonate, that make you feel like you've gotten to see what a destination is, what it's all about. And I think when you look at a lot of the travel products we've created and we continue to create, a lot of it is just circled around trying to get better at that, making it easier for people to have those experiences. And that's all. The concierge is where that all started. And I still think today is probably one of the best executed ways to deliver on that.
Well, I think it's all about the human executing that. And it's one of the things that we, as a vacation rental industry, for those that are in the vacation rental industry, is something that we struggle with, because we can't have concierge desks at every single house. Whereas hotels can have somebody very well trained for that particular hotel, that particular destination, and they do it extremely well. So it's something that I think is worth studying. I know you do a lot of that, and then you implement it in technology. And you guys do an excellent job. I mean, you are the leaders of, I would say, concierge service through technology in homes. But today's guest really is all about concierge. I think most people recognize her. So why don't we get into the show? Sarah Dandashy. She's been in the industry for over 18 years. With hotel experience. Sarah has worked at some of the top hotels in the country. For over 15 years, she was a hotel concierge and part of the prestigious organization Leclerc d'Or International. Nice. In 2015, she earned a special award from the organization, which helped her create and foster generations of concierges, titled Best Young Concierge in the World. Sarah is also a major influencer, content creator, through her platform, Ask A Concierge. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This is exciting. And it's always a great conversation when it's, anything concierge related and guest experience related.
It is. It's a fun conversation. I'm really excited to have you on the show. We got to meet a couple weeks ago at the High Tech conference and struck some really interesting conversations and really wanted to get you on the show. So, but before we get started, for those of us that don't know your background or have never seen you, why don't you give us a little bit of who you are, what you do in the industry, and how you got into the concierge space?
Yeah, definitely. So, kind of as you said, so I've worked in the luxury hotel space for over 18 years. Of those years, 15 of them as a hotel concierge. And as you mentioned, Les Clés d'Or, I was part of the organization, still am, but not an active member because I'm not at a hotel. But Les Clés d'Or is the gold keys of concierge. So if you've ever been in a really, fancy high-end hotel and you've gone past the concierge desk or maybe talked to the concierge and they have gold keys on their lapel, that's how you know that you are dealing with an absolute professional. It is an extremely difficult organization to get into. It's kind of you've even seen some of the movies like Grand Budapest Hotel. It's this like secret, but not so secret brotherhood and sisterhood of concierge that it's kind of like if you know one, you're connected to all of them around the world. So I've been part of that organization for quite some time. So my background very much is being, has been a concierge and delivering that high level service. Now, about 10 years ago, as it kind of ended up being a happy accident, I was asked to do basically a vlog, a video blog of something I'm an expert in. And I was like, oh, this is going to be ridiculous. What am I going to do? And then I just sat there and I like took stock of everything. And I'm like, well, I give people advice on what to do on a daily basis, like what to eat, see, and do in LA. Nobody's going to want to watch me talk about this. I'm just gonna do this and just whatever, I'll put it out there on the internet. Like, I'll put it out there on the internet. I guess I'll call it Ask a Concierge. So simple, right? Sometimes like the best ideas are the simplest ideas.
Yep.
And it immediately took off. And I also immediately realized that, wow, my information as far as what to do in Los Angeles was not only applicable to those coming to LA, but those actually here as well too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the birth of Ask a Concierge came from. And it was very much this notion of doing that, that classic professional concierge advice, but now bringing it to social media and then through video, through social in all different forms. And it's grown on and it's taken on a life of its own. I work with a lot of big hotel brands. I don't even work at a hotel behind a desk anymore. I do have a couple of private clients to keep me on my toes. But yes, it's been a very exciting transition, and that's a bit of my background.
It's so cool, Brian, when we think about it, because again, going back to when we were kind of doing this intro, if you experience the really unique opportunities, experiences, whatever they are in a city, it enriches your travel to such a level. And look, and there's nothing against, I think if you go to New York, you need to go to, the Empire State Building and go down to Ground Zero and, and the Statue of Liberty. Those are all really, really cool things and things you ought to see. But in a lot of these cities, even for the locals, they don't realize the hidden gems that are around every corner. I mean, Sarah, as you think about the role of a concierge in a hotel, I think holistically, right? It is one, it's being able to open doors and get people into these experiences, but it's bigger than just simple recommendations of the normal touristy things to do, right?
Oh, totally. I always say, the hotel concierge in that space it is your liaison to the city. And part of what makes a good concierge is somebody that can basically do a quick read on who the guest is and give an appropriate recommendation for them. You know what I mean? If there's somebody that's like okay, I'm traveling with my kids, but we want something high end and this and that. Like something that you might send a family to is going to be very different than if you've got maybe, let's say, an older couple and they're like, we want something more sophisticated and maybe like they're playing jazz. So it's being able to really like tailor your recommendations. Somebody that's like, hey, I only eat at kosher restaurants. What are your kosher restaurant recommendations? Like knowing all of that. So it is this really interesting role because it's like you have your finger on the pulse of things, but at the same time, I always say it's not about knowing all of the answers right away because I mean, you could ask me like, "Hey, where's a great place that I can get like spaghetti gelato?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to look into that for you, find out." So again, at any point, that's a very random thing, but and I do know where to get that. But if it's all about kind of like finding those, recommendations as well too. So and you're constantly learning.
Yeah.
But it is this really interesting space because again, you're helping people have that experience. And coming back to actually what you just said, as far as like, oh, the Empire State Building or like the big experiences or the quote unquote touristy experiences, those are absolutely okay to go visit in a destination. And maybe it is through the use of a concierge that they can help you not wait in as long of a line
Mhm.
or can get you better access or can give you a recommendation to somebody that can give you a private tour experience of it so that it's not just the Empire State Building, but it's like you're getting to do maybe a private tour experience and now you're seeing a whole different side of it. So that person really is going to help you see the destination in a different way than if you're just necessarily doing a random Google search and pulling up ideas, which is fine. That's a way to do it as well too. But the concierge element to any stay, and I think, obviously I have a hotel background, but I mean, even as a vacation rental, when you have a vacation rental, you have to remember that where they're staying, where the guest is staying, is only one part of the whole experience. So, how does where you're staying help you experience the destination? So, it goes, as you mentioned before, it's a holistic sort of approach, but it rounds out and it makes a whole, they can have an amazing experience in the city, and that will also make them have a wonderful memory of their stay with you as well.
I think concierge, Matt, and we talk about this a lot, is the single most important people element
Mhm.
inside of hospitality. I think we connect really well. We've done an excellent job of automating things like the reservation process, automating the check-in process. But when it gets down to it, building the actual experience and having that communication piece with the guest comes down to the concierge. And I feel that hotels have nailed it. I mean, they really understand the guest that's coming in. They understand repeat guests, something that we haven't. I don't think that the vacation rental has necessarily managed to get that aspect of the business right.
Mhm.
And it's because we have a lack of training in that space. I mean, hotels really do dedicate a ton of resources to it. To me, the concierge person is a connector. I mean,
Yeah.
when I think about a concierge person, and I talk about this all the time, you have to be fully immersed in that local area. You have to know absolutely everybody in that local space. And you have to also be able to create a relationship with the people that you're referring your customers to. Otherwise, it falls apart, which is why this is such a difficult exercise. Property managers and vacation rentals run a vacation rental business. And that in itself is complicated because they've got so many hats to wear. What we don't have time is to then take on the concierge aspect of it,
Yeah.
start going and meeting all of these people and creating all of these unique experiences to then be able to serve it to the guests, which is really where technology comes into play.
Mhm.
Do you think that technology can or will replace the aspect of concierge, or is it something that, especially in hotels, will never be replaced because we really need that human element?
You need the human element. Now, that being said, and I am very pro technology. I mean, that is where we're going. How many of you guys probably have your phone right next to your hand, right?
Mhm.
I do too. Look, I mean, that's the reality. When it comes to technology, you can sit and look at your own habits to know where we're going, So you can't say, oh, we can't have technology. Like, okay, like this is how it's going to be. Now the key is how to weave it in so it does streamline some things that maybe you don't need a human for. So if you're looking for just general recommendations of what to do, maybe that can come up on your phone. But is your phone going to make a phone call and get you that reservation at XYZ restaurant, which if you go on Open Table, it's not available there. So you might be able to have some plugins that it can plug in and make a reservation, but it's like, can it go beyond what's not accessible online? And that is the human element. So I feel like you're always going to need to have, a human there to kind of like, maybe the technology takes the guest like through 80% of the way, but then you have to have that human element to help execute it or fine tune it as well too. And I think that there's also something to be said, as I was talking about these, like curating these recommendations. Yes, you can ask for general things, etc. But, there's something to be said for reading a guest
Mhm.
and being like, okay, this is their vibe. This is what they're gonna. They seem like they want trendy hip, or it's like, oh, they seem like they want classic, old school, or okay, they just want a hole in the wall, like super local experience. I mean, could those be things that you could click through to like filter recommendations? Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's very different understanding recommendations versus like securing a reservation for you are the two things that are different.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And that's the key. You can have anything can spit out recommendations.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like doing the work.
Sarah,
There's also a trust element there, right, Matt? I mean,
Yeah.
I would trust a human over computers and reviews 90% of the time.
Well-
I don't think that a computer can really give you that level of trust.
well,
But it's interesting. So you brought up a really interesting point that you were talking about hotels and how they're really good at curating for their guests. Generally, it's because they have an idea of who their typical guest is.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because it's like because of the brand, the style, the et cetera. Obviously, you will have guests of all types ultimately at the end of the day, but there's a general type of guest. So I think that that's a really great mindset to be in, especially in the vacation rental space. It's like, okay, what general type of guest is going to be staying with me? That obviously can change, but I think that that is a really good indicator or a good starting point when it comes to figuring out, okay, like generally the people that stay here, they like to stay here because of the location and they want to walk, or, they want casual, or it's a really beautiful high end, property. And they're like, okay, they're going to want more high end restaurant experiences. And by the way, we're just focusing on restaurants, but there's so much more to it as well, too. So I think that you can kind of, if you start looking at your individual properties as hotels themselves, as far as that experience, that should help direct, or at least streamline the average recommendations that you might be making.
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah, one thing I think would be interesting to get your thoughts on is understanding a little bit around the economics and how you
Yeah.
view them, both from the property standpoint, right? And then from the concierge standpoint. One of the shifts, so I've been on 4 panels already this year. I was on one yesterday around ancillary revenue in the vacation rental space.
Mhm.
And I keep cautioning people to, a lot of them think, oh, I'm going to make a bunch of money on selling activities. And, my concern is I don't really know that that's the value. If you approach a concierge service type service, whether it's in person, virtual, however you're going to be able to scale it, is that really the value, or is it in improving that guest loyalty? Because I've suggested these properties, look, if you can do it for a minimal cost, you ought to do it because the benefits of the repeat guests and everything are going to vastly outsize any, little ancillary revenue you're trying to make. Are we
Mhm.
looking at it wrong?
I would say it's the whole thing. It's like it comes with the entire package. So it comes with the package. So maybe you charge a little bit more per night, and you make note or you advertise it like, oh, it comes with a concierge service. You know, that's where the value add is not
Yes.
necessarily on the back end, like, oh, I'm going to make $25 per person on a tour, which by the way, that's a bonus. You know, I mean, that's like the nuts and bolts. But like what I always caution, and again, this is traditionally speaking, okay, so to first of all, just at least address that, what I just kind of tossed out there casually is that understanding concierge services is that it is like a referral fee, like
Sure.
how you would use a realtor and they make money off of sales. The same thing would be not with all businesses, but with some in the concierge space. Now, that being said, a true concierge doesn't let that dictate where they send people. If
Important.
they
I think
happen
that's
to send
important.
and that's the most important thing. I mean, I can't tell you, this is a classic example. I always say I had started at a property and they worked with this one florist and owners were sweet as can be, but their flowers sucked. Like, I was like, what is that? Like, I was like, I could buy something nicer at the grocery store and stick it in a vase. And I was like, and I am no florist, but they were so nice. And compared to what I had been used to, I'd worked with this other company and it's like, their flowers are amazing. I mean, and granted, like they do flowers for like Oprah and this. It's like, you know, that if you're going to call them and they're going to deliver flowers, like you're going to look like a rock star. But then the one gave a 20% commission and the other gave a 10% commission. So, like, you know, that adds up over time and that's a significant change. But I remember, like, we as a team, I was like, okay, look, I'm sorry. And I know they're super nice, but like, and I know we may make more money, but I was like, in good faith, I cannot send flowers that look like that to somebody that with my name behind it. That looks horrible. Some of them are dead. What's going
Yeah.
on? So that's where you have to find too that you have to be like, okay, I might actually be making less on this, but I know people are going to be impressed and more will come. And it's also that representation of you. And it's a representation of you and your recommendation or your suggestion or experience, but it's also what the guest wants. You know what I mean? So you have to ultimately put the guest first when it comes to that. Like maybe it's like, okay, cool. There's like a weird tour in Hollywood that they go to, like where all the people, all celebrities have died. I don't happen to have a relationship with them. That's a very specific request. Somebody asked for that. I'm like, okay, let's make that happen. I may not make anything off of it, but that is like totally their cup of tea. And then they come back and they're like, I did this amazing tour and I've discovered where everybody died. And it's like, okay, cool. Like you're happy. That made your trip, you know? And again, I'm throwing out these really bizarre examples, but that is what the world of concierge is that at any point, any day, any stay, somebody is going to be coming up to you and asking for something or reaching out and asking for something. And you're like, that's new. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah.
So it's how to think outside of the box with that and ultimately give them what they want.
I think the evolution of concierge has changed. I mean, all of those things that you just said is fascinating to me because you're absolutely right. If somebody, you know, if a customer asks me for a bouquet of flowers and I spend $100 and it arrives and it looks like dead flowers, and I used to own a flower shop as well. So those people that don't know, I used to do very high-end flowers in the area, or I'm going to take a picture of it and I'm going to upload it into Instagram and be like, this hotel, look what they sent me.
Totally.
Or the opposite is I might make less money, but I received this amazing bouquet of flowers. The hotel goes above and beyond. I post that to Instagram and all of a sudden as a hotel, I might have earned less money, but that simple photograph could generate me so much more business because the impression is I am actually taking care of my guests no matter what the cost is. Is what have been the biggest differences that you've seen in the past, let's say in the last 5 years, the biggest changes that you've seen as a concierge from them to now, whether it's technology or people-based, and how do you continue to train your staff so that they continue to provide the best service possible?
Great question. So two key ways is one is how guests like to communicate. You know, for the longest time, it was like, go print it out on nice paper. They want to read it. Now they're like, just text me. Like, I remember when it was like, oh, can I call them on their cell? And I'd have to be like, is it okay if I call you on your cell phone? Because it was like your cell phone's so private. And now they're like, please call me or text me. Most of the time, they're like, just text me for everything. They don't even want a confirmation email necessarily. They just want you to text them. So the communication style has definitely changed. And then with that, also, guests are looking for more. I mean, yes, there are times that they absolutely might want like the nicest, fanciest places, like the see and be seen, but more often they're like, what are the hidden gems? What are like the cool experiences? And I'm talking about from like luxury properties, so where it's like they can go wherever. So this has been this really interesting shift that it's not necessarily money driven or finance driven, but it really is experience driven. And if it happens to cost more and be that, sure. But if it happens to be like a local shawarma place and they are wanting that, because that's really cool for whatever reason, they're more driven by that experience, the actual experience, than maybe like the cost of things.
Brian, a couple things Sarah has said really strike the core. I mean, definitely, I think the experience economy, it's
Sure.
why people are traveling now down to the place they stay, but also where they're deciding to go and have those experiences. But knowing your guests, which she talked about earlier, right? If you cater to guests who are eco-conscious,
Mhm.
then you need to know like the activities and recommendations you're going to make are need to fit. It's almost that
Yeah.
we're all much more we're putting out there what our values are. We're wearing our values a little bit more on our sleeve than we did in the past. But it reminds me, Brian, of something you go back to a lot, which is knowing the guests, having a place where, whether it's a loyalty program or somewhere, so that the next time they come, whether it's your concierge or what have you, they shouldn't start from ground zero with every guest. In our industry, repeat guests are really high in leisure. And so we're not using that to our advantage. And I think sometimes guests feel like, man, I've been staying here 5 years and you're still asking me if I want to, go on eco tours when that's all I ever do. Right. Or things like that. I don't know. I imagine, Sarah, that's somewhere we've got your team probably gets to know people on that really personal level, but I mean, are they storing that information? In the
And
concierge
I'm
world?
curious, and I'm
Yeah.
curious as well, because one of the things that I think the hotel space does, which we still don't have the ability to do unless you have multiple locations, which is they store the information of their guest, and it doesn't matter where that guest travels, as long as they're staying with that brand, they know the guest.
Yes.
In vacation rentals, we still haven't managed to
Yeah.
information and send it. Imagine if all property managers, Matt, had guest information about the things that they love to do, the type of food that they love, the music that they listen to, the experiences. And we weren't so, I'm going to call it egotistical, but that's not the right word, but we weren't so scared to share information about the guest.
Yeah.
The guest experience would change
Move up
massively.
dramatically. Yeah.
Oh, completely. And that's a great point, is it's like, how do you share that information in a way that like the guest doesn't feel threatened by you sharing that information
Right.
as well? Because like it does bring up different challenges, but it does also make the hotel experience so different. I'll use a great example. There was a hotel I used to work at, and they're not the only ones that do this, but a lot of high-end hotels tend to. But like the Peninsula in Beverly Hills, for example, their housekeeping staff is trained. It sounds weird, but it's a really nice touch. Their housekeeping staff is trained that like, when they go in the room, they can actually they do monogrammed pillowcases. Okay. So they have a stack of monogrammed pillowcases. And if they don't have like your initials, they will make sure to get your initials and have them on the bed for you when you come and stay there. And that means it can be if you're a solo person or whether it's a husband and wife, etc. And so they make note of that. What the housekeeping staff can do is they can see who tends to sleep on what side of the bed. So that, let's just say you have a husband and wife or whatever, a couple, and you can tell that somebody sleeps on the right side, somebody sleeps on the left side, that the monogram pillowcases are on the correct side of the bed. Now
Wow.
I use that because, again, it's an extreme example, but it's how to do something that's highly personal, but like is such a nice touch. Oh, and by the way, talk about a great thing is that all guests can take those monogram pillowcases home with them, no charge.
Done.
So
Gotta
good.
go from there.
But
Yeah.
fine. I mean, that goes to the point. Why do we use Google? Google makes my life easy. When I
Mhm.
type it in, the chances are it's on the first page.
Mhm.
If you constantly had to go to pages 2, 3, 4, and 5 to find it, and they weren't learning, then
Mhm.
it's not it's not a convenience. And I think we've shown, at least Americans in particular, we're willing to give up some data about ourselves if you are going to make my life easier. Where I think we get
Sure.
frustrated, to your point, Sarah, earlier, you got to be careful. It can't feel creepy,
Yeah.
right? I don't, it does, and I don't feel like people are stalking, but then also you can't take my guest data and then also not make my life easier. Now I feel
Yes.
like I've given up something of value for nothing in return.
I also,
Exactly.
yeah, and I also feel that we try to do things the easiest way possible. Guest
Yep.
experience, customer experience
Art.
is difficult. It's a very, very difficult
Well, it's
thing.
personalized.
Yeah.
It is.
What it
And what
is.
you just said, that is not an easy exercise. You really have to think about linens, and I'm sure they go down to the linen count and figure out, what type of linens do some of these people want in their house and expect or in the hotels. And that in itself just complicates operationally everything that you're doing, but it elevates that customer experience to a whole different degree.
So, Sarah, where's the industry headed now? As you look into your crystal ball, obviously, like you said, tech's playing a role, but I think it was really important. Tech is making it easier on the guest to access sometimes the service, but it is
Yep.
still the service that guests are looking for. But where do you see things going over the next, 3, 5 years, do you think, within the concierge space?
So personalization is still king, and it's going to continue to be that way. It's kind of like people want to it it's like they might get an inspiration or an idea for where to go or where to stay from online, from social media. We all know social media has a huge impact on the travel industry, all aspects of it. So they might like get an idea from it, but then like, the real differentiator is gonna be like, "This is how my experience was catered for me, and it was curated for me and my interests," or, it's like, "I require a special diet because of XYZ," or, "I'm allergic to this," and they knew that. So it's this personalization that is definitely going to continue, and that's gonna be something that'll absolutely be driving the luxury market.
Hmm.
Because again, we all have technology at our fingertips. But it's like, what is the differentiator for luxury? It's personalization. And that's where you do need the human element to be able to execute that, fine tune that, etc. So it's just this balance of double downing on that along with technology.
Yeah.
That is, I think that's it. You're working towards very similar technology, Matt. I think that is the goal with some of the product that you guys are putting together, which is personalization, learning about the guest in house. How do we serve the guest better? And then bringing video content to them when they need it, right?
Yes, but I do think too, while it's in I was appreciative that Sarah mentioned that, it was an extreme example, which I really appreciated of, because maybe it's just me, my wife and I, it could be a hotel, it could be a tent. We sleep on, I can tell you, if you're at the foot of the bed, I'm on the right and she's on the left. I don't know if I could sleep. Like I'd have to get up and be like, you got to switch me. Like I don't know what to do over here. But but I also think it's important. It doesn't have to be crazy like that to start.
Yeah.
And that's
Oh,
sometimes I think, right. People think, oh my gosh, and they feel like it's this huge thing. Hotel groups that say, do you like, if you're a member of loyalty, do you like firm or soft pillows? Like if you could
yep.
start there, that's a huge impact on the, people's enjoyment of how well did they sleep and things like that. You can start small, right, Sarah?
You can totally start small, and actually, I love that you brought this up because obviously I'm bringing up extreme examples, but something that I've seen in vacation rentals, and I will also say that many hotels have actually done this. Something as simple as even like a curated list of recommendations, because again, if I go into a vacation rental and there's like a little like sheet of, hey, these are some of the most popular restaurants in the area, and they've already done the work. Like if you're looking for a high end evening activity, this is great. If you want something casual, quick around the way, This is where the closest grocery store is, etc. I know that seems kind of mundane, but just something that's that somebody's put that together, and maybe it's signed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, maybe you just sign it at the end, but it's all printed out. Something like that adds a personalized touch in a way that you can kind of scale. And at least it starts it that way. It sets that tone. And that's a very easy addition that people can give a sort of sense of space and place. Or maybe they do have suggestions for activities. And maybe they go as far as being like, hey, you can call like Big Bus Tour and speak to Mary, or say that whatever it is, like maybe you've established a relationship so that they can actually make the call themselves, but you're giving the name of that person,
Yeah.
so that you know that you might not have to be hands-on, because some guests don't. They're like, I'm good doing it myself, but like you've just helped make that connection, while then being able to
A little
step
bit
away.
easier. Yeah.
Mhm.
And this goes, and I know we're running out of time here, but so your book, Hospitality from Within,
Yeah.
we talk about how ultimately the technology makes it look easy, but
Mhm.
it's still, it's the duck who's looks easy on the
True.
top, which I think is what we're all looking for. Your feet may be kicking, but the guests feel like, man, it was just seamless. But it starts with people. And I think your book, Hospitality from Within, is a great way if people are looking at how do I kind of instill hospitality
Mhm.
into my employees, that the
Totally.
role of hospitality. I encourage people to check it out, because I think it can help them as they're looking to mentor some of these young people coming up within hospitality, because I think we need a lot. Hospitality is hard, and you're
It
seeing
is.
I would just say the hours are tough sometimes. You can't do it remote a lot of times, as we've talked about here, and we need to be drawing in talent into this industry,
Mhm.
because that's what's going to keep it going.
Oh, absolutely. And again, and that, and, the book kind of like ties into that, but it's how do you deliver that genuine service and
Hmm.
make those real connections? And then how and the simple things that you can do. Maybe it's just something as simple as like a little welcome drink that it's like somebody really loves gin, and you've
Yeah.
got something that's a gin-based drink for them, or they really like whiskey. It doesn't have to be extreme. It's the simple touches that are personalized that go a very, very long way, and it doesn't have to cost you a lot. And even going back to what Brian said as far as, like, the flowers, it's like something like that, you know, if you take pride in it, like, they'll take a photo of that and they'll share that, and next thing you know, they're doing your marketing for you,
Right.
So it's like, think about, it's that pay it forward. So it's like if you do that little bit of something extra, it will come back to you tenfold. So instead of nickel and diming over like how much extra is this going to be, or can I make like, is this going to cost $5 and I'm going to lose this, or what? I mean, like, you have to look at everything on a bigger picture and a bigger scale, and know that the experience is going to drive people back, and that's the value. It's how they're made to feel is the value versus so many other aspects. So, yeah.
That's a great way to end, Brian. I think there.
I agree.
Yeah. What a
I think
lesson.
one little extra thing is you're an expert at what you know and what you love. Don't try to go outside of your wheelhouse to offer something you think people are looking for.
Yeah.
If you don't know about that subject, if you don't know how to execute something, it's going to execute poorly. Um, and I find a lot of people try to do things that just aren't within their scope. So the little things done really well is what people
Go a
speak
long
about.
way.
Totally.
Sarah, you
Absolutely.
create a ton of content. If people want to follow you, just kind of learn from you, what are the
Mhm.
different ways? I know you're on LinkedIn, but this
Yeah.
may take a while. Give them all the different ways
the
to
different ways we can
absorb
reach
your content. That's right.
Well,
That we can stalk you.
it's pretty simple. No, so you can connect with me obviously on LinkedIn. I'm under my name, Sarah Dandashy, but then all my platforms, really, really simple, easy. It's Ask a Concierge. So be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. And then yeah, I'm there. I'm answering on the other side. So definitely send a message.
And if they want to buy your book, where can they
If you want to buy my book, you can find it on Amazon. So super easy, quick. It's Hospitality from Within. Or if you do want a signed copy, you can still get a signed copy on the website, which is hospitalityfromwithin.com. So again, try to keep it so simple and easy for everybody. All I ask is that if you do a signed copy, maybe just give me a couple days because I am on the road. So I do actually hit sign and write a special note to everybody that buys it directly from that site. So I actually have to be here physically to do that.
There you go. A little hospitality from within. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
That's it for this week's episode of GuestX. Be sure to sign up for our email list at guestxpodcast.com. That's guest, the letter X, podcast.com. And follow us on your favorite podcast apps so you never miss an episode. We are Mr. Guest Experience Brian Humawi and Matthew Loney signing off and reminding you to always create a customer experience worth talking about.
This podcast is a Hospitality.fm production.